Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 21st episode of The Inbox. So we're starting off with a question today from the Gibster of Gibsterness. And he's saying that he currently only owns one ship, which is a Mustang Omega that he got through the AMD promo. Says that he's not really much into racing, though he's not too bad at it, and would probably rather be in the transport business by exchanging it for something along the lines of a Core or an Aurora. His question is, should I exchange them now or should I build up the money through racing and then buy a bigger ship like a Constellation later on? Frankly, I have my doubts about racing being a real profitable career early on. I think you're probably going to have to work your way up through some, smaller tracks. And frankly, in most games like this, the transport industry is probably the easiest and most consistent way to make money. So if you like racing, it's something you want to do, you could absolutely make some money through it to then buy a bigger ship. But I would probably suggest that you actually move into that Reliant Core, which is going to be a pretty well-rounded ship anyways, as well as kind of being that mini hauler to get you into the transport business. And then you can use your profits there to buy back a racing ship or just save up and continue to work towards the Constellation. I have more faith in making money through transportation than I do in racing, especially since a lot of racing is going to be skill-based. Now, transportation is obviously going to still be skill-based. You got to know where to go buy low and sell high. Sometimes you got to hold on to cargo, those types of things. But it's not quite the same. You know, the transport piece is more about making intelligent decisions, where the racing piece is more about actual skill. So for me, I would say your safer bet would be to get the Core now, and then use the funds that you earn there to maybe upgrade to a Freelancer, and then upgrade to a Constellation. And then once you have your Constellation, you do bigger runs, and then you can afford kind of a novelty ship like a racer. So that would be my suggestion for you. Neo Ninja says, do we have any information on Blockade Running? About the only thing that we have on Blockade Running right now is that we know that the Banu merchantman can be a blockade runner. That's the only thing I've really seen to date on that. Now, it's going to kind of take in a couple different forms, because if you're just in open space and somebody puts a blockade there, I mean, you could just turn your ship in one direction and quantum drive that way and then quantum drive around them, and it's going to be really hard for them to stop you. So I think where it's most likely going to be seen is blockades around, like, ports, like something around, like, kind of providing a bubble around Port Alizar. Or maybe there's a known jump point. Maybe somebody puts up a blockade there. I think what's going to end up happening is it's going to be a combination of shield management and engine management. So basically, you want to give your engines as much as they can so you can go as fast as possible. And as you're heading towards the blockade, you probably want to have your shield facings forward, maximum that way, so you can absorb as much fire, because once people see that you're not going to stop, they are going to shoot you. And then once you break past their line, you probably need to throw your shields all into the back to then make sure that wherever you're getting shot from is going to give you the best chance of protection. That's probably about as much as we know right now. There's going to be other aspects of it, like quantum drive interdiction. We've seen a couple different, mindsets or mentalities on this. Whether people have to go into quantum drive and then you pull them out, or if there's things like gravity wells that prevent people from going into it. So, you may end up needing to use cruise mode to drive past if they're using something like a quantum drive preventer, or if they don't have something like that, then quantuming as soon as possible is probably your best bet. But that's the problem. We don't know enough about those sort of mechanics to really answer that, but that's basically what we know to this point. Den949 says, what advantages do you think the Polaris, the new Corvette, will have over other ships in its size range? What would you like to see in it? Well, the only ships that are really in the size range, it's supposed to be 100 to 110 meters long, would be some things like the Starfarer. You're going to have like the Merchantman in that category. The 890 Jump is in there, a little bit bigger, and you have the Carrack. Those are the four that I kind of put in that category that are in that similar size range. So when you look at those, you've got a fueler/transporter, you've got a transporter/blockade runner, you've got a luxury ship kind of multi-purpose ship, and you've got the dedicated explorer capable of doing a few other things. Those are all very non-combat roles. The Polaris is going to be a very combat-oriented ship. I expect for it to have some pseudo-anti-cap weapons. Now, it's not going to have the baseline railgun like you have on the Idris, but I would expect that it's got some large-scale weaponry as well as being dotted with pretty good-sized turrets, probably a lot of them. When I think of a Corvette, I think of a ship that's more of a support ship for other capital ships. It's a sub-capital ship, even though it borders in that range just based on its role. But it's going to be protecting other capital ships, or maybe even a slight pest to enemy capital ships. But I don't envision it being just kind of the, I'm bringing the big gun to the fight, so I'm bringing the Polaris. Now, the Polaris is going to be a pretty nasty ship, but I think ultimately what I expect out of it is to be kind of a bridge between something like the Idris and something like a Retaliator or something like that. Is probably that stepping stone where it's combat focused and has the ability to support or attack other capital ships. Robert Bratton says, STL, thanks for answering my question. Could not agree more. You're welcome. Now that you and others have been talking about multiple shields, I'm curious about how effective it's going to be on small fighters. The big ones have plenty of power to support multiple shields, but the small fighters have limited power and many shields might be a problem. Your thoughts on this, and thanks for the time. Okay, so having multiple shieldings doesn't necessarily mean you've got more shields. It's just about the number of facings that you have. So if you've got a ship that's got, let's say you've got 100% of shield, 100% of shield power, and you've got a forward-facing shield and a rear-facing shield, and that's it. Well, that's going to be 50-50. You know, if you've got a four-facing shield, that's going to mean that you've got front, back, left, and right. That's going to be 25, 25, 25, 25. So the amount of power that your ship is actually putting towards that isn't really changing. Now, that changes a little bit when we start talking about ships like the Vanguard or the Sabre, where we know that there's some redundancies built into it. But we need more information on how that's actually going to play into it. You know, do they stack? Do they run alongside each other? How does that work? But on smaller ships with multiple shields, you're right. Theoretically, those could go down faster. But remember, it's not necessarily allocated as like I said, if it's a four-facing shield, 25, 25, 25, 25, it's not like the front-facing shield gets 25% and it never pulls from anything else. You know, your shield it's about prioritization and the shieldings. So I hope that kind of helps answer. I know it's kind of vague. A lot of it's going to come down to better shield management when you have multiple facings, but that's kind of the general idea of it. Magnanimous Only says, what ship do you think that is not currently in hangar is next to be flight ready? I know that this question's about a month old, so I'm going to go ahead and give you the current version of this. The Reliant is not in hangar yet, but I think that's going to be our next ship that's not even hangar ready that ends up being that's flight ready. It seems like they're doing a lot of work on that. We know that in 2.4 we're going to have the flyable Starfarer, but that's in hangar now, so that doesn't necessarily count. Epic Strat says, Youngblood, hello. What's your favorite non-combat ship? I love the Starfarer Gemini. Now, that's bordering on combat ship based on the heavy armor and the upgraded weapons and stuff. But the Starfarer Gemini is a really awesome ship in my mind. It looks great. It's something that I think it gives a lot of versatility. But outside of that, I mean, I'll be honest with you, the Mist Prospector was just released, and I'm actually stoked about the Prospector. I think it looks very cool. I think it's going to be a fun career option to have. And then for me, the other one would be the Cutlass Red. Now, the Cutlass is in a bad place, but they're reworking the Cutlass. But the Red specifically, I think, opens up some really interesting potential gameplay. The ability to fly into a dangerous combat situation, kind of, whip your ship around, pull somebody's ejection seat or the escape pod. There we go. Pull their pod into your ship while you're flying off. I'm not necessarily as interested in the medical side of it. I hope to have an NPC or a buddy in the back that wants to do that. But the idea of the flight into that sort of situation to pick somebody up, to me, sounds like you're almost living on the edge. It sounds really exciting, and that's something that I really am looking forward to. Irene says, will there be more ships at launch from the Banu or the Xi'an than we currently have? The short answer is we don't know. We know there's going to be more ships from them, but as far as whether they're going to be ready at launch, I'm not sure. I think a lot of that's going to depend on how much interaction we're going to have with those two races in Squadron 42, because Squadron 42 is currently what's dictating what gets work right now. I would imagine that if once the game on release has interaction with those races, then yeah, we'll probably see at least one or two extra ships from each of those, because only seeing Banu Merchantman would get kind of boring, or only seeing the Aopa Cartual would be kind of boring. I think what we're going to end up seeing is a couple of ships, and then continual development as we go, but I think it depends on where the storyline goes in Squadron 42 to really answer that question. And then the last one for today, Cat Flaps. Keep up the good work, Youngblood. Happy to be a patron of this channel. I'm glad to have you on as a patron of the channel. One question. If I have more than one game package, am I able to make multiple characters? Or do you have to have different accounts? I thought they said that if you had more than one game package, you could have the possibility of a second character and use them as an NPC on one of your ships. I probably heard it wrong, but it would be sweet not to have to make a second account if I want to do pirate stuff. Okay, so to answer that, we know that you're going to be able to use your other packages as NPCs. And I think you're going to have to create them and give them, like, not necessarily a background, but, like, a name. And they may end up being, you know, just... You could probably run them standalone if you wanted to. But the piece there that we don't know is if there's going to be any association between those two characters and your reputation. You know, is the reputation going to be very bound to that NPC, or is it going to be bound to the handle and what you're using to log in as? I think that's something we're going to get more information on soon, because I think we've seen Chris talk about NPCs and them being sold separately at this point. The primary reason that I created the second account was just because I wanted to make sure it was separate. I wanted it to be completely separate. So regardless of which way it goes, I would be safe. Not everybody's going to want to have to go that way. It sounds like you don't want to go that way either. But I think it's just really going to depend on how it all works out with CIG. My guess is that you're probably going to be able to keep them separate. But if you then want to use that second account that's become a pirate as an NPC on your main good guy account, on your main good guy character, that reputation is probably going to bleed over a little bit, because you two are known as associates at that point. So that's kind of how I would envision that playing out. But again, we'll just have to see what direction CIG decides to take with it. So that's it for this episode of The Inbox. As always, get your questions in the comments if you have them. Otherwise, stay tuned. I'm going to have a lot more of these coming. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.